Hi, I'm Ayya Yeshe. I hope you're enjoying the Festival of Radical Awakening. Let's just take a moment to breathe. I'm sure you've had some wonderful teachings so far. Just take 3 deep breaths when you hear the sound of the bell. I started this festival because I saw that so many issues that radical teachers or progressive teachers mention that they can feel alone in a wilderness are actually connected. Human trafficking, environmentalism, poverty, uh, queerphobia, racism, misogyny, they all are intimately connected. They're issues of social justice and well-being. And it's hard to see how, if you're a person who is focused on the sacred, who has had a connection with the profound interconnectedness of life, that you can't come to see that human beings' well-being determines their ability to practice the spiritual path, and that if to be truly spiritual is to be compassionate, and to be compassionate is to not become well-adjusted to injustice or apathetic to evil, which is almost more evil than evil itself. So I'd like to talk about so many subjects, but I only have 20 minutes. I'll move between sacred feminism, ecofeminism, anger, and transformation. So first of all, I'd like to tell you a story from the West Isles of Scotland, where my ancestors come from. It's called Soul Skin, Skin, Seal Skin. There was once a group of women called Selkies, who were magical beings who lived in the ocean with the great mystery and connectedness of life. They roamed free, eating fish, lying on the beach, living in family groups. Sometimes they would come to the shore and they would take off their seal skin, and you would see them as women. One day a young fisherman fell in love with one of the Selkies, and he started to bring her presents like necklaces of shells and pearls, and he shared with her his simple life, his love of the ocean, and his mother who lived in a cottage. He told her of green fields and healthy chubby children and highland cows roaming the meadows and flowers in spring. And with time, she too fell in love with him, and they married. She gave up her life as a Selkie and took her magical skin and hid it away. And she became devoted to domesticity. They were happy for a time, and she gave birth to a healthy girl. But her husband became insanely jealous and fearful that his wife would return to the wild. So he burned her seal skin, which was a representation of her connection to the sacred. He tried to possess the wild. And as this happened, his wife became sick and sallow, wrinkled, and all her hair turned white before its time. She became weak and tired. And for fear that she may die, she went to visit a wise woman who lived at the bottom of a well. "Ah, your husband has burned your wild nature. You must return to the wild or die, my dear. Your 11 sisters have also been killed, and you must sing over their bones to restore the sacred balance." The wise woman taught the woman the song to sing over her sister's bones, and she went to a cave where sure enough she found her sister's bones, and she sang over them, and she saw the sinews and the muscles and the bone click back together, and magically her sisters were restored, and they returned to the ocean, except her youngest sister, who was too young and could not be revived. So she took her younger sister's skin as a way for her to return to the wild. The wise woman had told her that if she did not return, she would die, so she had no choice, even though she did not wish to leave her beloved child. Before she went back to the ocean, the great mystery, she taught her daughter the song to sing over the bones to restore the sacred balance, and the way to put on her silky skin and return to the wild. The daughter waved her mother off, and she dove back into the ocean and into the great mystery. But once a year, on the full moon of May, she would return to her daughter and her husband to sing joyful songs, to carry in her heart the fullness and joy and also the pain that had been her human existence. The story of the Selkie woman shows a person who has lost themselves, has lost their true nature, their connection to power and the sacred and their authenticity. A person who is disconnected from their needs, who doesn't have healthy boundaries. Sometimes other people steal our skin by making us doubt and hate ourselves, by gaslighting us, by abusing us. But the journey of the hero is the journey to rediscovering our own sacred goodness and our own truth. In what ways are the sacred, masculine and feminine balanced or imbalanced in us? What sustains you? What are your dysfunctional patterns? How can you restore your relationship to nature? How can you restore the balance of the sacred in your life? In Vajrayana Buddhism, there is a principle of an enlightened being called a Dakini, which represents the primordial nature of mind. They represent goodness without fabrication. They awaken dormant spiritual impulses hidden in our subconscious and are semi-wrathful female enlightened beings that remove obstacles on the path. They could be female bodhisattvas, spiritual warriors, meditational deities, and guardians of the teachings. They grant realization and expose hypocrisy. Chandra Easton said, "The Dakini is a messenger of spaciousness and a force of truth, presiding over the funeral of self-deception. Wherever we cling, she cuts. Whatever we think we can hide, she reveals." There are three kinds of Dakinis. One is spontaneously born from the nature of truth, like a deity like Tara or Vajrayogini. One is skyborn, which is a person with great good karma who is born as a deva. And then there is mantra-born, which is a human, usually a woman, who through her spiritual realization and meditative practice has attained the state of a Dakini. Dakinis can manifest in countless forms, in countless ways, to bring beings on the path. And in Vajrayana Buddhism, it's said that women have a greater capacity for the realization of the nature of mind because they represent wisdom and they're naturally in touch with their intuition. And it's part of the Vajrayana vows to not disparage women, but to see them as, wise beings. Unfortunately, if we look at all the concentration of power within Tibetan men, Rinpoches, and the widespread sexual abuse, although there are still many good things in Tibetan Buddhism, the patriarchy is extremely strong, as is the ethnocentrism. I really never worried that much about feminism until I ordained and I was told to pray to be reborn as a man. And as a woman, as a nun, I had to walk to the back of the line. And I was constantly being told, to pray, to make good karma, to be patient, to accept my lot. All the Western monastics I ordained with 15 people, only myself and one other nun are left. Our disrobing rate is around 90%. I remember a monk who was living a Western monk who was living under the stairs of a Dharma center, whereas the Lama was living in the penthouse above. I remember a Western nun who sent me a story asking for help, saying she'd been eating out of a garbage can in a Dharma center because her Dharma center didn't support her. And although the Buddha was very progressive in ordaining nuns, at a time where women were really just seen as chattels, he affirmed their spiritual capacity to become arhats and as independent beings. And he said a virtuous woman was better than a non-virtuous man. But, culture and so many things over time, patriarchy has taken over. And in so many Buddhist traditions, women can't fully ordain. The life of mothers and lay women is denigrated, even though it's one of the most important jobs in the world, and women's capacity is denigrated. That is why we need to revive the sacred feminine. People say, well, we're non-binary, gender is a construct, why do we need that now? I mean, still the majority of people are cisgender. And, it's like saying, why do we need Black Lives Matter? We need Black Lives Matter because because Black lives are being harmed. We need the sacred feminine because for thousands of years, God was a man and women's sacred nature has been denigrated and women's voices have not been heard or believed. Women are the embodied earth. Our fate is inseparable to the fate of the earth. Patriarchy has stripped us of the moral authority that we are part of the earth and that the cosmos is sacred. This has had devastating effects for the environment and for women. Once we belonged to the places where we lived, we were rooted in those places, into the stones. We knew the plants that would heal and the plants that would harm. We had a deep respect and coexistence and dependence on the natural world and each other. We had a deep sense of investing in community. People would take no more than the land could give, and they did restorative farming to preserve the land for future generations. There is a moral obligation to care for the earth so that our children can inherit a living planet. And for the planet itself, because what befalls the planet befalls us. There was no dualism in Celtic cultures between the sacred, mystical world and the everyday world. When we think of re-establishing our roots, our connection to the sacred, and investing in each other and building beloved community instead of just investing in things and not people, how can we heal the planet? How can we heal the wounds with brotherhood and sisterhood and cultivate a deep, profound connection to the sacred, to the present moment, to our own innate goodness? In what ways have we lost touch with the sacred? What patriarchal archetypes are we adhering to that don't serve us? I mean, you can see in The Handmaid's Tale the patriarchal stereotypes. You can also see it on TV, you know, the Jezebel, the Martha, the maid, the mother, the whore, the virgin. What sustains you? Creativity is at the heart of the feminine mystery. We create life, a determination to nurture rather than destroy. Patriarchy is a culture of dominance rather than a culture of nurturance. So when I say patriarchy, I don't mean men are to blame for everything. I mean it's a system of dominance that oppresses both men and women, but largely men have benefited more from it than women. Although Bell Hooks said that the first casualty of patriarchy is a man's psyche is severed from himself, you know, because up until the age of 7, both boys and girls cry the same, but at the age of 7, boys are told to man up, and they suppress their emotions, and we can see the results of that in, you know, the spate of male suicides, the idea that men can't be vulnerable and share weakness or be uncertain, and also in a lot of male rage. You know, so how can we return to feel the call of a fully lived and authentic life? Because justice is how love looks in public. A lot of men will tell me, you know, Ayya, we have equality now. You know, what are you talking about? And if a woman speaks up about violence or inequality, she's regarded as like a whinger or a nasty woman or a ball breaker or a bitch. Whereas male anger is valorized and seen as, you know, men are listened to. But just to give you an idea of the fact that even in developed countries, we still don't have equality. Elaine Pandalovsky, Rosalind Staggard, Likun Pan, Karen Gilliland, Emerald Wardell, Ruth Matala, 76-year-old unnamed woman. These 8 women are the women killed in Australia in the last 2 months by male relatives or family members or partners from domestic violence. 137 women are killed each day by intimate partner violence or family male violence. 40,000 girls are married below the age of 18 each day. 40 million trafficked people per year. Of them, 32 million are female. So that's 71% who are female. 20% of American college girls will be raped before they graduate. 1 in 5 women in developed countries will be raped, and 1 in 4 women in developed countries. Women still make 76 cents to the dollar in most developed countries and retire with 50% less superannuation than men. They still do the majority of the housework, childcare, and elder care, and they hold space for community, but their work, which is not capital building, is not recognized and still seen as less than. Women are still not safe. And if you look at, the traditional Buddhist hierarchies, men are still very much in charge. We can say that we value women, that we value the sacred feminine, but look at your Dharma center. Who is sitting on the throne? Who is making the decisions? What resources, what training do nuns have? How are we treating Western monastics? Why do they have a 90% disrobing rate? Who is an empowered female teacher in your lineage? And make a conscious effort to say to centers, I'm not going to participate in your center unless you have equal ordination for women, unless you support nuns, unless you have some kind of social work, some kind of paying back to the community, and breaking the patriarchy, breaking the system of dominance. In Buddhism, we try to live, with self-examination. We try to live with compassion and morality. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, but in truth, the examined life is painful. Are we really attending to the things that matter most? Justice, life, death? Or are we caught in things that don't really matter? We need radical self-examination, a maturation to become a truth teller. If you are busy denying women's real experience, if you derail conversations about women and center on yourself, you're not a man who loves women, you're not a good man, and you're not a man who is an ally of women. And I've seen it time and time again, just another woman is murdered and there's all these men saying, well, I didn't do that, #not all men. How about you become an ally to women, you believe women, and you do things to address the violence that is so widespread in both developing and developed countries. Don't become well-adjusted to injustice. Patriarchy has taken away women's right to control their bodies, their agency, their education and career prospects. Patriarchy has burned women alive and stoned them. Patriarchy has insinuated that women are less intelligent, less capable, less logical, physically and spiritually impure, less resilient. And for a long time, women were not human beings. And people say, well, these times are over. We're not burning women alive anymore. Well, in some developed countries, there are still witch hunts. But now there is a kind of more passive-aggressive, not believing women. 98% of reported rape cases will never lead to a conviction. And we can see with Epstein and that director, that abuse went on for a really long time. And it took about 20 women to convict him of what he did. Male anger is valorized, but when females express anger, they are nasty women, bitches, ball breakers. Anger has been much maligned in Buddhism, but for unenlightened beings, anger, which is different to rage or acting out, is a natural emotion as a spectrum of emotions that human beings have if they're unenlightened. It's important to examine if we're justified or being entitled. But anger needs to be processed or it can lead to health problems like heart disease and ulcers. But anger can also show us something is wrong, that our boundaries have been breached, something is unjust and needs to change. Anger needs to be looked at. A psychologist called David Bedrock said something very profound about anger. He said, refusing to hold and alchemically cook anger, grief, pain, jealousy, and so forth is a disempowering form of innocence. Intention to simply rid oneself of these qualities are an ultimate self-betrayal. It looks like a betterment of oneself, a spiritual lifting, when actually it leads to ethical and relational dishonesty, as well as a corrupted shadow casting light. It's also spiritual bypassing. And people saying, well, Ayya, I can agree with what you're saying, but I don't like the tone that you're using. It's just another way that we, not specifically to me, but to anyone who, it's a very common thing, you know, I agree with anti-racism, but I don't like the angry tone you're using. I agree with gender equality, but I don't want to hear stories of rape. It's just another way of tone policing, another way of spiritual bypassing, that people with more privilege maintain the status quo, male fragility, white fragility, so that they don't have to look at what they are complicit in. And we can't really be spiritual until we start undoing the violence inherent in so many of the economic and social systems that create suffering for oppressed people. And that includes, you know, white women looking at white fragility and how they are also complicit in racism as well. So this is kind of what I have to say today. I'm just seeing if I have missed anything. I welcome your questions, and thanks so much for being here. May you be well and happy, and may the sacred feminine flourish again.